In this video, we'll look at the key elements of a blockchain application. More specifically, we'll look at the various building blocks of a blockchain application and show how those individual blocks interact with the various ledger components in order to utilize the ledger. Let's start our discussion in terms of a process flow diagram. And let's start with the blockchain developer. As you can see, they develop two key components. They develop the applications used by the end users, and they develop the smart contracts. So let's talk a little bit about the applications first. So these applications would encapsulate business processes that need to interact with the ledger. These applications could be written in different languages on different platforms and so on. And as you can see, the applications can invoke smart contracts and they can also access the ledger directly. Also, from our diagram, you can see both smart contracts and the ledger can emit events, and these applications can actually consume and act on those events as needed. So they can monitor specific events and take actions as required. The other major component that's developed by a blockchain developer is the smart contract. So smart contracts are a lot like stored procedures on a database that perform transactions on the ledger. Smart contracts invoke transactions that read and update world state. Transactions that update world state are recorded by the ledger and added to the blockchain. The developer of a smart contract would actually define all the interfaces required to modify world state. So for example, in the case of an asset transfer app, they would need interfaces like query owner and update owner for a specific asset. And of course, they would be free to develop other interfaces as needed. So now let's look at the ledger at the bottom. As we can see, there are two components to the ledger. First, there's the world state that maintains the current state, which is the results of executed transactions. For example, in the asset transfer example I mentioned earlier, the specific owner of a particular asset. And then there's the blockchain, which is comprised of blocks which contains the transactions themselves. The transactions in the blocks are transaction invocations, and as was discussed in earlier lectures, these are cryptographically linked blocks containing the transactions. It's important to note that the blockchain itself doesn't have the data. It's just a list of the smart contract invocations. Conceptually, it's very similar to existing logging systems. The blockchain itself holds a historic sequence of all transactions. So if we go back to our asset transfer example, and we wanted to transfer ownership of an asset from one party to another, an application could be built as well as a smart contract with the appropriate interfaces to allow the world state to reflect the most current owner of a particular asset, as well as to record the transaction that transferred ownership of an asset from one party to another.